Hello and welcome to Vegas Odds Football. I am your host, Daniel Ocho. In this episode, I'm going to be giving out our Week 3 against the spread NFL betting picks, some player props, some totals, picks against the spread, everything. I'm going to recap a little bit of our bets from last week. So without further ado, let's jump in. All right, just getting right to it. Let's talk briefly about our bets from last week. I gave out some teaser bets that I thought were maybe going to cash, and you know what? It was brutal. We got crushed. The Saints, the Browns, these teams killed us. And listen, sometimes when you're betting football, the reasoning is there, the process is there, but ultimately this deck is sort of loaded against you. You have to keep that in mind, that more often than not, the book is going to win. So when you have three long teaser teams that have these low totals that are projected in that 1.5 to 2.5 to 3 zone of point spread, and they all sort of blow it for you. In the last 2 weeks, bets I've given out on this show, I gave the Bengals out, a team that lost despite scoring with no time left on the clock, despite scoring a should-be game-winning touchdown with no time left on the clock. This past week, I gave out the Browns, who ultimately lose a game where they're up 14 or 13 points with 1 minute and 35 seconds left to a Jets team that had to recover an onside kick and had to have Joe Flacco throw 2 touchdowns back to back. These are all-time bad beats. I think we're due for some wins this coming week, in part because we've had such bad luck just with how some of these end game, late game situations have played out. Or at least that's what I'm telling myself, right? Because they can't all be bad beats like this. So I am undeterred going into our week 3 picks. I'm excited to make some money this week, make up some of the beating we took the last couple weeks, and let's start with our week 3 games. Thursday night football, Pittsburgh Steelers at the Cleveland Browns. These Thursday night football games have actually been pretty good so far. I've been pretty impressed with the schedule that Amazon has put together. They obviously got some say in this big NFL deal they made to put some better games on the schedule, and I'm not sure the Steelers-Browns game is really indicative of that, but I'm a Steelers fan. This is a storied rivalry, at least over the last couple years. They've produced some iconic moments, the Steelers and the Browns. Who can forget Mason Rudolph getting clubbed in the head? They've had some crazy sort of upsets with the Browns upsetting the Steelers over the last couple years, all sorts of stuff. And I think that this game might end up being a lot more fun than people are projecting right now. The line in this game is set at Browns -5. The over-under is set at 38.5. Another one of these low over-unders. The betting public, or the books, are clearly not giving the Steelers much respect after back-to-back pathetic offensive performances. It looks to me like this coaching staff, offensive coaching staff, Matt Canada, offensive coordinator, doesn't really know what he's doing in terms of scheming plays open. He's the only X factor year to year. Mitchell Trubisky looks completely incompetent. He can't really string together a drive. He can't really convert a third down. I saw a stat earlier this week about his completions behind the line of scrimmage just being brutal offense from the Steelers unit. The Browns have been somehow better than the Steelers on offense, despite Jacoby Brissett leading that charge on that side of the ball. They blow a heartbreaking, almost impossible to lose game against the Jets this past week. Now they host the Steelers, a team that has historically owned them. Big Ben, I believe, has more career wins at the Browns stadium than any Browns quarterback of the last 30 years or since they came back into existence. So that just goes to show you what the Steelers team has been doing to the Browns since they came back more than almost around 20 years ago now. But now it's Brissett, it's for Trubisky, not exactly a stellar quarterback matchup. The Steelers come off a bad loss to the Patriots where they didn't really feel like they had a chance, even though they technically did at the end there. It was a one-score game. And they are forced in the unenviable position of coming back on a short week against a divisional rival who I think is going to be fired up to prove something on the defensive side of the ball. It looks like Jadeveon Clowney will not be playing in this game, something to keep in mind in terms of this defensive unit that sort of collapsed against the Jets last week. My leaning in this game is the Steelers +5. I may sprinkle a little bit on the over here as well, that over at 38.5, because I think that the public right now is fading the Steelers offense. They're overreacting a bit. We just saw a Joe Flacco-led Jets unit drop 31 points on this Browns defense, a lot of that being in the fourth quarter. The Steelers have all the skill position players there. They have Deontay Johnson. They have Najee Harris. It's just a matter of this offense really clicking and coalescing. I'm not sure if Mitchell Trubisky is the guy to do that. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Steelers go to Kenny Pickett in this game. If Mitch gets hurt, that offensive line for the Steelers is not really trustworthy. It could be a very strange sort of game. This 5-point line is really in that Vegas zone. As I've said before in the show, I try not to go too crazy betting on these Thursday night games. I usually like to lean more with the player props just to have a little fun here and not worry about the wonkiness of the Thursday night games. But if I did have a play here, it would be the Steelers +5 and maybe sprinkle a little on the over 38.5. Moving on to the Kansas City Chiefs going on the road to the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts coming off an embarrassing loss to the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Chiefs coming off a pretty impressive Thursday night win against their division rival Los Angeles Chargers, who the team who everyone sort of crowned as the natural successor in that AFC West. The Chiefs are still the Chiefs. They still have Patrick Mahomes. Turns out they don't need Tyreek Hill to win games. Their defense is really stellar. They really showed out. They had a game-winning interception return for a touchdown last week, and now they go to Indianapolis, a team that has put together one of the worst 3-game runs in the history of the franchise. That Jacksonville loss to end last season, then their week 1 tie with the Texans, and then last week's embarrassing performance by this Colts offense. I don't know how much longer Frank Reich can go dodging any blame in that building. He has been heralded as this brilliant offensive mind, brilliant play caller, but the proof is in the pudding at some time, right? Because this team has just not gotten it done when it matters most. And now we're looking at a Colts team that needs a win here. All of a sudden, this season could get out of hand for them. They could be 0-3, looking up in the division to teams like Jacksonville, teams like the Titans, and it could be a very difficult situation for them to come back from. I believe that Matt Ryan's not completely toast, but last week was not supportive of that argument. This guy was through some terrible interceptions, but beyond that, this offensive unit just looks completely overmatched. Michael Pittman should be back for this game. We don't know yet, but he should be back in the lineup next week. He is a key cog for this offense. The secondary receivers on this Colts offense look completely inept last week. Alec Pierce couldn't step into that role. Josh Doolin couldn't really get it done. If I have a play in this game, it's going to be the Colts +6.5. The trends typically tell us that if you look at 0-2 teams since 2016, they're winning or covering the spread at least a 57% clip. They tend to get it done week 3, especially because they sort of realize what's on the line here. For me, the Colts are not going to win this game. I don't see them winning it outright, but I do see them covering the 6.5 point line. So give me the Colts hosting the Chiefs this week. Next up, the Baltimore Ravens on the road against the New England Patriots. The line here is set at 3. The Patriots are +3 at home, over under at 43.5. This Patriots team needs to at least stay competitive in this game if they want to remain competitive in their division. The Dolphins look like a real contender here. The Bills are the Bills, maybe the best team in the entire NFL. If they have any hope to remain competitive in this division, they need to at least remain competitive against a Ravens team that we don't really know what to make of through 2 weeks, right? Because the Ravens looked like world beaters in the first half of that Dolphins game. They really collapsed in the second half. We have a low over-under here. I typically like to lean on the underdog, at least at home with these low over-under games. So give me the Patriots +3 because this line doesn't really make sense to me, right? I don't see why the Patriots should be only getting 3 points to a Ravens team that really looks much superior to them. Maybe the Patriots figured out some stuff on offense last week, but I don't know. I'm not confident in it. I'm not going to really throw a lot on it if I do bet this game, but I'm giving the Patriots +3 in this Ravens-Patriots matchup. Next up, the Cincinnati Bengals on the road against the New York Jets. The Bengals are 4.5 point favorites, over under at 45. My play in this game is going to be the over. I think that the Jets offense with Joe Flacco at the helm is actually much better than people may be giving it credit for. They have a lot of pieces on this offense. We know already that Zach Wilson will not be playing in this game. They want him back at 110% from what I read, and he's not there yet. So Flacco comes back after a huge performance in the fourth quarter of last week's game against the Browns, leading them to a last-second victory. Now they play a Bengals team that is coming off a bad loss to the Cowboys. They're 0-2 now. This is the Super Bowl representative of the AFC last year, and we see these Super Bowl hangover teams every season. We're always surprised by them. But I still think the Bengals have a lot here. That this is a team that is just stacked offensively. They've been in sort of a slump. We see Joe Burrow taking some big, bad hits the last couple weeks. The guy's just holding the ball a little bit too long, and if he doesn't really get it figured out, I'm worried he may not be long for this world career-wise. He may get injured, see another catastrophic injury, and miss some time. I don't want to see that happen. I want him to stay upright. I want the Bengals to show us why they were the class of the AFC last year in the playoffs, proved that they belong in that class again. They need to avoid going 0-3 if they want to win this division, which I think they still have their eyes on that. Give me the Bengals -4.5, beating the Jets this week, despite the fact that the Jets are relatively competitive. More importantly, I want the over in this game. I think the Bengals put on an offensive showcase. I think the Jets can score a few touchdowns here. My big play here would be the over that 45 number. I would be surprised to see this number not climb over the course of the week, but give me the over 45.5 in Bengals Jets. Next up, Lions at the Vikings. The Lions are getting 7 points on the road in Minnesota this week. The over-under in this game is set at 53. This is another high projected over-under. This Lions offense looks maybe electric with Amon-Ra St. Brown, DJ Chark, some of these guys they brought in. Hockenson hasn't even really been a part of this offense to date, but they just have so much skill, so much really just talent and electricity on this offense. Goff is playing out of his mind. I think that if you were to look back at a lot of these statistics for these passing advanced analytics for the last year, I would say, from November of last year through now, you'd be shocked to see just how high Jared Goff would rank among the league's quarterbacks. This is a guy who has dominated over the last year. He's just constantly made plays. To me, I think he's turned a corner as a player. I was so low on him in Los Angeles. He felt to me like a guy who was completely overmatched. He just didn't belong at that level of play. Playing in the Super Bowl, he was a guy who completely laid an egg there. But it seems to me in Detroit, he's figured something out. He's improved as a passer. He's processing the field quicker. He's not holding the ball the way he was in Los Angeles. And he's really just feeling himself within this Dan Campbell-led offense. Since Campbell took over as a play caller, this guy has really just exploded onto the scene. Give me the Lions +7 against the Vikings. I know the Vikings offense is electric. I know they have playmaking left and right. Justin Jefferson, everyone's high on Kevin O'Connell, and it feels like almost a sucker bet to take the Lions in this spot, but it feels like almost a battling of two narrative-driven teams here, right? Because the Vikings feel like the media darling in terms of the new class of the NFC North. The Lions feel like the upstart that everyone is really pulling for in terms of Hard Knocks team, Dan Campbell clips going viral every week. Despite that, I'm a sucker. I'm still buying into this Lions team. I still want to be a part of it. I think that there's probably some value to be had here with maybe teasing the Vikings. I'll give that pick out a little bit later when I give my sort of big picture picks for the week. But for now, if I'm picking an against the spread pick, give me the Lions +7. Next up, the New Orleans Saints at the Carolina Panthers. The Saints are giving 2.5 points to the home Panthers. The over-under in this game set at 40.5. This year, so far, these home dogs in low over-under games are really covering at a really good clip, 60%. I already mentioned this 0-2 ATS trend that I mentioned before in terms of teams trying to avoid that 0-3 spot, doing everything they can to avoid going 0-3, and the Panthers fall into that realm. They are one of these teams that needs to avoid going 0-3, maybe not just to keep their playoff hopes alive, but to keep things like Baker Mayfield's career alive, to keep things like Matt Rule's job security alive. This team could be in a very ugly spot if they lose this game at home. I think they're going to win this game outright against the Saints. I was all in on the Saints. I was so wrong about them last week. They crushed us in our teaser. They crushed us in our money line bet. Give me the Panthers money line in this game, +130 over the New Orleans Saints. They have everything to lose here. They need to win this game to avoid going 0-3, to avoid maybe Matt Rule losing his job next week. So give me the Panthers here, despite the fact that I don't like this team. I don't like Matt Rule. It just feels like a must-win situation for them, and a home dog in a low over-under game feels like a good trend to hop on. Next up, the Houston Texans at the Chicago Bears. The Bears are 3-point favorites. The over-under in this game is 40.5. The Texans have looked pretty frisky. They gave the Broncos everything they could handle last week. The Broncos played like shit on both sides of the ball. Davis Mills may actually be a pretty good quarterback. I say this every week. Everyone is still shocked by this, but I think Davis Mills is just a competent NFL quarterback who's going to be a pain in the ass if you're betting against him every week. That being said, Justin Fields looks like a completely incompetent NFL quarterback who threw for 70 yards last week. Darnell Mooney, projected to be the #1 guy within this offense, has, I think, 4 yards receiving on the season on 2 receptions. He's like 5 targets or 4 targets. Just embarrassing numbers. The only guy who looks like he has any sort of value, if you're talking fantasy prop bets here, feels to be David Montgomery. Looking at this game, it feels like a get-right game for the Bears. The Bears are not going to lose every single game. Justin Fields, to me, despite his struggles so far, I think has a friskiness to him, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him get on track against this Texans team here. So I like the Bears money line here. I'm not sure they cover the -3 line. I don't trust this Bears team enough to be giving points. If I were to have a lean here, it would be the Texans. I might buy the half point up to 3.5 if I was taking against the spread, but I think the safer bet is the Bears money line. I may throw this Bears money line play in with a couple parlays. I'm going to give out a money line parlay a little bit later to get some fun odds that you can sort of root for as the day progresses, and the Bears will be involved in that one. Moving on, let's talk now about the Philadelphia Eagles on the road against the Washington Commanders. The Commanders are +4 at home against the Eagles. The over-under in this game is set at 50. The Commanders defense looked bad, really bad. Could not tackle, could not cover, could not do much of anything against the Lions last week. Now they play the Philadelphia Eagles, a team that, as I'm recording this, has not completed their game. They have not completed their Monday night game against the Vikings. So I'm sort of still going off that week 1 trend, sort of still going off that preseason, what we think this Eagles team is going to be. I think this Eagles team is going to be really good. I took them to win the NFC East. I think the Commanders are going to give them a run for their money in that regard. I'm not buying into the Giants after 2 weeks. I'm not buying into this narrative that they may be competitive for the division. They may honestly be the worst 2-0 team of all time. They've had some fortuitous luck in terms of playing the Panthers and playing a Titans team that was sort of really struggling at the end there, that's also in transition. This Eagles-Commanders matchup could be huge at the end of the season when we look back in terms of determining this division. A 4-point line is really in a weird zone, divisional matchup. Give me the Washington Commanders +4 against the Eagles in this game. I just think 4 points is too much in a divisional matchup between these two teams, a Commanders team that everyone is fading after a very bad performance last week. If you bet on Carson Wentz, you know that he rears his head. He's going to have a revenge game. He rears his head whenever you don't want him to. Whenever you're writing him off, whenever you think he's done, that's when he decides to show out. I would not be surprised to see Carson Wentz really just stick it to his former team, the team that threw him out the door, that ran him over with the bus on his way out, and covered this 4.5 line, maybe even win. If you're going to bet the 4.5, maybe sprinkle a little on the money line at +155 just to have a little fun with it. Something to keep in mind. But give me the Commanders +4 against the Eagles. Next up, the Jacksonville Jaguars at the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers are 7-point favorites here. Justin Herbert has torn up rib cartilage. Despite that, this line's still at 7. We don't know his status going into this game yet as of the time of this recording. It looks like he's going to play. It's going to be a pain management thing. The Jaguars are coming off an incredibly impressive win against the Colts, the team that everyone thought would be the class of this division. Now they are going on the road to a Chargers team that is looking to avenge a tough divisional loss against the Chiefs. I think this is going to be a high-scoring game just in terms of both offenses really trying to find their groove. It's tough because I also think that the Jaguars have a surprisingly spry defensive unit. They're doing some things defensively that I really like in terms of limiting third down conversions, putting themselves in a good position defensively. Their offense still is trying to figure out a lot of kinks. They may be forced to push the ball just to stay competitive with the Chargers offense that is loaded from front to back. We don't know Keenan Allen's status going into this game at the time of this recording, but even without Keenan Allen, Gerald Everett really adds an element to this offense. They have guys like Joshua Palmer, and they have guys like Jarius Guyton, just so many players here on top of Mike Williams, who's really proven himself to be, in absence of Keenan Allen, a pretty solid X-receiver, a guy who can move the chains, who can convert red zone opportunities. I know he disappears, but I think he has the talent there physically in a way that so many other guys don't. Looking at this game in terms of picks going in, give me the Jaguars +7. It doesn't feel good, right? It doesn't feel good betting against the Chargers again. It doesn't feel good betting the Jaguars, frankly. They have a lot of the stink from last year still. It feels almost like an overreaction after last week's Colts game to take the Jaguars now on the road against a team that we think is going to be much better. But despite that, this Jaguars team just feels much improved to me. They feel like a team that even if they're not winning games this year, which I don't ultimately think they're going to be in the running to win this division, despite their strong sort of early start, this feels like a team that's going to be competitive. Doug Peterson seems to have found something in terms of actual team building, actual chemistry, actual leadership in that building to make this team a team that takes care of business. Going on the road and laying an egg after a big divisional win against the Colts is the kind of stuff that bad coaches do. And I don't see Doug Peterson as one of those coaches. I see him as a guy who's trying to change the culture within that building. And in order to do that, you have to go on the road and you have to compete in this game. You can't just get ran out of the building on the road against a great Chargers team. Show them why you drafted Trevor Lawrence. Show them that you guys are in this conference. You're the future of this conference when you take a guy like Trevor Lawrence, and show them why. So to me, I think the Jags +7 is the play here. I know I said I could see this being a high-scoring game. Looking at the over-under at 48, looking at some of the defensive matchups that we've seen, J.C. Jackson is going to be healthy for this game. Derwin James, Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack. The Chargers defense is loaded. They played a tight game to the under last week with the Chiefs on Thursday Night Football. The Jaguars defense, I think, is a little sprier. Like I mentioned before, they have some guys there. And on top of that, the Jaguars offense has really struggled to consistently sustain drives. So I may throw the under in this game in a teaser, a 6-point teaser, tease that line up to 54, put that into play with another play one way or another. I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to play that yet, but that under 48.5 in some capacity, maybe pushing that line up to 50 on some of these books, you can book that higher line. That may be something that I sprinkle on as we get closer to game time. Next up, the Green Bay Packers on the road against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Packers are +2.5 2.5 against a Bucs team that may not have any receivers next week. Mike Evans suspended, Chris Godwin with an injury. Julio Jones should be back next week. It was a true game time decision this week. We don't know exactly what his status will be. The over-under in this game is set at 41. I see this being sort of a defensive game. I think people are, amid all the Tom Brady stuff, amid all the Mike Evans fight stuff, amid all the injuries to their offensive line and defensive or receiver group suspension, all that stuff, they're losing the fact that this Bucs defense may be the best in the league right now. Todd Bowles is defensive head coach. This is a priority of his. I think that it's an organizational sort of direction or directive to make this a more defensive-minded team this year, to make this the type of team that where the defense is really pulling this team towards competitiveness, even in absence of Tom Brady dominating. Tom Brady threw for less than 200 yards last week. He's not lighting the world on fire. He's 45 years old. This is what you should expect from a 45-year-old quarterback. He threw for 5,000 yards last year. That was an anomaly. People don't do that. He's not a human being. He's from another planet. But ultimately, time catches up to everyone, even Tom Brady. And maybe we're starting to see the first signs of that. Part of that obviously has to do with the injuries to the offensive line, the injuries to this receiver group. The Packers on Sunday Night Football take care of business against a bad Bears team. We know what went on in that game. We know that the Bears weren't really competitive here. Give me the Packers money line in this game against the Bucs. I'm going to be fading the Bucs until they prove otherwise. I know they just kicked the shit out of the Saints, despite me betting the Saints money line last week. But the Packers, I think, are going to end up being a better team than this Bucs team for all the reasons I just mentioned. The Bucs, at a certain point, they're having such bad injury luck. This defense is really phenomenal, and I think that in an over-under game where the Packers are catching 2.5 points, or in an over-under where at 41, really low over-under, give me the Packers catching 2.5. I may tease this game alongside that over-under I mentioned before in the Chargers game, a little Packers plus 8.5, and then the under 54 in Chargers Jaguars. That seems like a fun teaser that could cash out for me. Something to keep your eye out on, and not really one of my main plays this week, but something I'm definitely going to dabble with, I think. Next up, Rams, Cardinals. The line in this game is set at 4. The Cardinals are +4, hosting the Rams, over under 50.5. The Cardinals come off an impressive defensive performance in overtime against this Raiders team. They forced 2 fumbles back-to-back, ultimately winning the game on a defensive touchdown. A crazy comeback. Kyler Murray showed that he's not done yet. He's not playing video games. All the contract talk, all the talk of this Cardinals team maybe being really terrible this year. Maybe it was a little bit exaggerated. Maybe some wish casting from the internet there. And Cliff Kingsbury, sort of impressive to me how he didn't let this team lay down and just die last week, because it very easily could have been that situation against the Raiders. This team was trending in so much the wrong direction between all the offseason stuff and sort of just the negative perception of how they handled themselves after week 1. The Chiefs destroyed them, a defense that's been beat up so far early this year. The Chiefs had to basically rest their players at the end of the game. They could have dropped 60 points on them, potentially. Now the Cardinals host a Rams team that, to me, hasn't looked as sharp as I thought they would coming off a Super Bowl. They seem to be figuring some stuff out offensively. This is a 4-point line, another Vegas zone line. I don't love these 4-point lines, to be honest with you. I'm not sure that I would bet anything in this game, but if I did have a lean here, if I did have a pick, it would be -4. The reason I wouldn't really love to bet something in this game is because those -4, -5, -5.5 lines, divisional matchups against a team that we all think is really good versus a team that we all think may be pretty shitty. That's where Vegas makes their money. That's where Vegas proves to us that we are dum-dums, and they are the ones who cash out every week. So it's likely a stay away for me. If I had a lean, it would be the Rams -4, but I don't know. I'm staying away from this Rams-Cardinals game. Next up, Falcons at the Seahawks. Seahawks are favorites in this game, -1.5, hosting the Falcons. The Seahawks looked absolutely abominable this last week. They were horrible. This offense was pathetic. Rashad Penny, 16 yards rushing, and he was the best running back on the field for them. They couldn't complete passes. They couldn't finish drives. All the Geno Smith for MVP talk really went out the window when they weren't playing a potentially bad Broncos secondary. And now they host a Falcons team that's been surprisingly frisky for like 2 years now. This Arthur Smith team does not die. They're constantly competing. This team won 7 games last year. They were probably the worst 7-win team of all time. The over-under in this game is set at 42 points. This is a big tease candidate for me. If you tease this game 6 points, you can get over that 7.5 line for the Falcons. I think that I'm going to tease the Falcons wherever I can, whenever I can get them in these sort of low over-under games where the estimated value of the tease is really there. I think I may dabble a little on the money line here at +100 because the Falcons really compete. Mariota does not look completely terrible. Kyle Pitts hasn't even been unlocked. This guy's a freakish talent, and they're still competing without him really showing out as a Gronk-level threat. I'm thinking I'll tease the Falcons in some capacity. When I come back to my bigger picks for the week, we'll reapproach this game a little bit, but right now I'm leaning towards the Falcons +1.5. If you think they're going to win, just take the money line, take them at +100, and they're a prime tease candidate. Next up, the 49ers, San Francisco on the road against the Broncos, Sunday Night Football. The Broncos are +1 at home. The over-under in this game set at 46. The public and the books are starting to fade the Broncos, I think. I think people are not keen on what they've seen from Nathaniel Hackett, from Russell Wilson. He's really struggled to find open guys. Last week, they lose Jerry Jeudy, and when he was in the game, it wasn't like they were setting the world on fire anyways. So the Niners obviously lose Trey Lance, bring back Jimmy G, the quarterback who led them to the NFC title game last year. All of a sudden, that contract doesn't look so bad, does it? And now, I'm not quite sure why the Niners are favored in this game. This feels like one of those weird snake rat lines that is going to move as we get closer to game time, where the Broncos may end up being favored. But for now, give me the Broncos +1. One of the benefits, I've said this before, of the show coming out earlier in the week is you can look at these lines and see where you can get some value here. I would probably lean the Broncos here. I mentioned a teaser candidate before, but I love a teaser of the Falcons +7.5 crossing that key number, and the Broncos +7. Both low over-unders, under 49, so you're getting that Wong teaser estimated value there. So give me that teaser. I'm going to put 3 or 4 units on that one. That's going to be one of my big plays this week. Okay, so that brings us to our final game here, the Dallas Cowboys +2.5 on the road against the New York Giants, a 2-0 Giants team, a Cooper Rush-led Cowboys team that just got off upsetting the Bengals. The Giants, obviously, with a big win against Baker Mayfield. This new coach, Dable, is really bringing some energy to New York. I'm from New York. I see it. I see the city is electrified by Dable, by the Giants team. For all those reasons, I think the Cowboys are probably going to win this game. At +110, it feels like I can't see the Giants team going 3-0. It doesn't make sense to me. Their roster is not very good. The over-under here is 39.5. We keep an eye out for those low over-unders because a lot of times you can get a decent spread there. The values to be had. Give me the Cowboys +2.5. Give me Cooper Rush another game. This guy's 2-0 as a starter. He's going to 3-0. The Cowboys are going to prevent the Giants in another classic from going to 3-0. And all of a sudden, the Cowboys could be 2-1 with Cooper Rush at quarterback and Dak coming back in just a few weeks. Keep your eye out for that and give me the Cowboys there. Okay, so now I have just a few big picks for this week. I gave out a teaser before of the Falcons and the Broncos, but I want to give another quick teaser out. Give me the Vikings -1, tease 6 points from that 7-point line. I know I said I love the Lions there, but if I can get that line down to 1, give me it. Then I'll tease that along with the Panthers +8.5 at home. As I said before, I think the Panthers may win this game, so I love this and a must-win opportunity. That's going to be my second big play of the week alongside that other teaser I mentioned. I wanted to give you guys another parlay just to root for a fun sort of pick that'll give you estimated value here. For that, I am going to go with the Kansas City Chiefs -285 parlayed with the Atlanta Falcons +100 and the Chicago Bears -150. 3-leg parlay +350. Cashes in. You bet $100. You win $350. Should be a fun bet. Should be one that maybe we're talking about next week as saving our week in terms of cashing out and giving us some money we may have lost on one of those teasers. Who knows? But that's the Falcons money line, Chiefs money line, and the Bears money line. Those are my picks for this week. Thanks as always for listening. I will be back next week with Week 4 NFL picks. Until then, good luck, and I'll talk to you guys next week.